Hi, and welcome to a Small Medium at Large podcast. I'm your host, Gail Heisen, bringing you intimate interviews beyond normal boundaries. I want to thank all of you listeners for sticking by and supporting, liking, sharing, and subscribing. Let me tell you a little bit about our special guest today. Our special guest is Douglas Widow Jr., who is from the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. His Lakota name is Wohpapi. His family comes from the Hollow Horn, Kills Alive, Lone Eagle, Yellow Shield, in amongst Builds Fire and Brown Thunder. He has been working with horses since he was a young man. Today he will share ancient cultural Lakota medicine wisdom and healing techniques, as well as Lakota cultural horse healing. He will share about the talking processing circle, active visualizations, and conscious release exercises for healing individual, ancestral, and collective trauma. This Lakota cultural equine horse therapeutic process works miracles for individuals, families, substance abuse and dependent individuals, veterans, oppressed populations, and Native Indigenous communities and at risk youth. Douglas is widowed with 5 children, and he currently works in the Santee Sioux Nation, Nebraska, as an IOP, intensive outpatient program counselor using Lakota cultural practices. He uses horses as healers, and his first language is Lakota. He has been sober for 37 years. Douglas holds 2 Associate of Arts degrees, one in substance abuse addictions and one in pastoral studies. Douglas Wohpapi is an expert in Lakota language and culture. He feels that it is better for him to have wisdom, uksape, than knowledge. Pardon me for my trying to pronounce things correctly. He will also be discussing ancient oral cultural Lakota stories, practices, and histories that not have been shared before or recorded by Western written history, including a story by his grandmother of the sacred ghost dance told to him in the oral tradition which differs from the written tradition. He is currently in the process of writing a book on all of the above topics. Let's welcome Douglas Widow Jr. Wohpapi here today. Hi, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here. Um, in my language, I would introduce myself a little bit. Sokaya kihe mitkaate kiha Douglas Widow Senior cha naha mitkai na kiha Hildred Loningo cha naha minikojo oyate mataha naha maspeg na ke oyate mataha. Um, Thank you for having me. Um, I've been doing this type of work for probably over 30 years. Um, I don't have a social media, anything like that. I did have a website, but it's being rebuilt. And so I've been to the West Coast um, sharing this knowledge with the horse, and I've been out there quite a few times this year, and it is awesome. Um, for one individual, I think they were probably in there anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes, if that, mostly probably about 10 minutes with the horse. And um, got to where they were remembered the trauma. They would express the sadness, crying, and then I would, in our culture, our ancestors were very smart. They uh, uh, they were very wise, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
They came up with calling the spirit back. Um, and that started so at a very young age. So as culturally people, indigenous people, we already have our own mental health and how we take care of things
Mm-hmm.
versus the Western model. And the two of them, they don't meet together.
I
Um,
I understand, and I'm not surprised. I before you go any further, I actually have my first question that I like to ask before we talk about all the work that you do, which
sure.
is, and this is a question I ask every one of my guests when they're on the show for the first time. Where did you grow up as a child? And were you recognized then as someone who would work with horses and do healing? And did your family support this? Or was there some incident or something that happened later on in your adult life that put you on a path of healing? There's like a pivotal moment or something where all of a sudden the light bulb happens and you know that this is your path and this is what you want to do. So I find that some people, their families are very supportive and recognize their children have gifts or different abilities. And then I find there's some instances where we have guests where it's exactly the opposite, with their families have no relation to any of those things, but the child grows up having spiritual experiences and wants to do different work than say what the family has shown them. So I was wondering that what that was like for you, and if you grew up in home with your parents and your family, or what your life was like growing up.
Okay. Grew up on the Cheyenne River Reservation. Grew up with no um running water, no electricity. Um, was with my grandmother most of the time. And her name is Louise Muttley, and her Lakota name is Wamble Kwakewin. And I gave that name to one of my daughters, so she carries that. Um, and she was very supportive, and just as I was talking about the mental health piece, um, my grandma was a midwife, and what they would do is she would use the ring finger, and they would take the whatever stuff out in the baby, and today they'll use a suction thing, and then they'll slap the baby and make them cry. Um, so that's their first trauma. Um, yeah, and but what grandma would do is she wouldn't spank them. She would clean their mouth out with that ring finger, and she would bathe them in sage water, and she would wrap them in a blanket real nice and tight.
Mhm.
And then as she's handing the baby over to mom, she's making a prediction
Mhm.
how the baby's going to be when they grow up. So what grandma said I will be doing is I'll be helping people, and uh I would be a very brave man. Um
And did she
and
pick your name?
today I
Did
what's
she
that?
did she pick your name and the significance of your name to match that you had a future of working to help people?
Um well, see, that in itself is the the family came up with that. And actually what it's called is Wakinchuze. And a Wakinchuze is in each Choshbai is
Mm-hmm.
a family unit, and then there's an extended Choshbai, um, and so within that Choshbai you have one person that's uh like an honorable man, and all the males will be named after him and his deed. So how I got my name was my grandpa his name was Yellow Shoe. Um I think it was John Yellow Shoe. And he wore the word bonnet, and long time ago they earned each one of those feathers, and him wearing that war bonnet going into battle, everybody wanted him. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but they didn't kill him, but they knocked him off his horse.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the reason how I got my name was they knocked him off his horse. And so that's what my name is, Wohpapi. And today, nobody hardly does that anymore. They'll come up with a name, and they would do that, or they would have the spirits come pick a name for them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, that's how I got my name, and then I also have a uh I'd call it a nickname, or my grandma she named me. See, my grandma, like I said, my grandma was very smart or wise. Um, when my grandpa died, her husband, um, when he passed away, she took that and named all the males in that church. But so my name from grandma was Wiasloha. And what Wiasloha means is um sneaking up on a lady. And yeah, and the only time she our young females or daughters are never left alone. They're always protected,
Mm-hmm.
or used to be anyway. And the only time they weren't is when they went after water. And so Grandpa, he knew that, so he was over there sneaking up on checking on Grandma. And so that's how I got my name. And so the reason, it runs deeper than that. So when Grandpa died, um, she kept him alive through us.
Mm-hmm.
So as a young boy, if my mom went to go visit Grandma, I would go, and I didn't think that she would notice, but today I Grandma was more than a midwife. She was a healer.
That's what I was
But
gonna.
I would slide something over to her, and I'll step on it, and I'll acknowledge who I am, because she couldn't see and she couldn't hear too good. And then she would touch my leg, and say, "Oh," says, "Raslan, you're getting tall." I thought I was fooling her by sliding that thing over, but she knew. And and she would say, um, Da Yahi, um, it's really good that you come see me, and she's, really happy. And so today we have a lot of our elders that are having dementia and all these other things, but like I said, grandma, even that grief is very hard, but like I said, she figured out how to keep him alive through us. And it was like he was coming to visit,
Mhm.
because of that name and because of what he did.
And the power of the name. Do you feel
Yeah.
do you feel that her spirit is with you when you're working with healing with horses? Do you feel her presence or guidance there? And
Yes.
yes, so really the support, my question has been answered. The support really came when you were a child and you had an amazing teacher in your grandmother because you just absorbed the learning by just being with her. You could learn the things that she was as a being, as a person. And she was obviously a healer besides just a midwife. And I have to say that I've been involved for about 35 years with the Huichol indigenous people of Mexico. And they're very, very ancient, thousands of years people. And they're finally being recognized by the Mexican government and being honored where before they were being treated horribly. So things are finally shifting there. It's just taking hundreds of years, but it's finally changing somewhat down there. But I was asking my friend about this, about the naming, and he said in their culture, in their Huichol culture, a child is never given a name for 2 years. And then after the whole family studied the child and their behavior and what they're like, that's how they come up with the name. And then at 2 years, they're given a name to explain who they are as a person. So my particular friend was a very sweet guy and like honey. And so they gave him a name in Huichol that means honey because they saw he was a very, very sweet child. And that's how the name is given. Where in our culture, you're supposed to have a name the minute the child is born, you're supposed to come up with a name. In my family, I always liked the culture of naming after someone in the family who's passed on, so that you're always honoring their name. So my son is named after someone that I dearly loved that passed, and my daughter's named after my grandmother, and my other daughter's named after someone that passed down the street. So I feel like I like honoring them in my children by passing the name on. So I want to go on to when did you then decide to do the work that you're doing now? And we'll go into that work. But was there something that happened in your life, or had you always been working with horses since you're young? Or have you always been working with healing?
Um, well, what happened was, I'm gonna say when I was 15,
Mm-hmm.
um, I, throughout my years, I'd go hang out with grandma and grandpa. Um, and I remember one year, one fall, they brought her to our house, and I mean, you could tell when there's tension, and I mean, nobody was yelling or anything. Um, and I heard grandma begging my mom not to have her go. Uh, and so what happened was grandma was being placed in a nursing home.
Mm.
And culturally, um, we don't do that.
No.
Um, and
Was this from
so
the
anyway,
reservation? Had she been living on the reservation until then?
yeah,
Okay.
different family members were taking care of her, and that's how it is today. There's only one family member that would do that, that would take care of the mom or grandma.
Mhm.
So anyway, they put her in her home, and she made it through the winter. And we went to go see her, and all she did was cry. And that I think it was in May, um, she passed away. And being 16, that that really hurt me because she was like my mom.
Mhm.
And I think at the time when you're taught all these things and then all of a sudden it gets taken away. Um, so I was very angry at my mother. Um, and so when she died, instead of listening to what she said, because my first language is Lakota, and and she would talk to me um like a male would, so I wouldn't be speaking like a woman would, like what she was. And so she, again, she was very smart, and besides her place, I couldn't go sleep at anybody else's house. And so I asked why, and she said, "Well, if something happens, I can't protect you." So anyway, when she died, I started drinking, um, you know, going down that path, and you know, it's very um tough. And then at the time too, you know, growing up, it wasn't okay to cry,
Oh,
especially a male.
no.
I'll give you something to cry about.
Heard that
Yeah,
before.
yeah. And anyway, got married real young, went to college, got married real young, and when that didn't turn out, my drinking gotten worse. Um, even to the point where being 23, you know, I was on the street in Rapid City drinking. Um, is very difficult. And um, finally one day, a lady counselor from home, called me up and said, "Hey, um, you want to go to treatment?" So I said, "Yeah." I said, "Anything to um try to, you know, not drink anymore." And so I went, um, and I was in a treatment, and just to let you know, as Native people, and that's the reason why today I address the treatment of people that are going in trying to get sober. I address it a little bit different because, and this can go for native, non-natives too, is that um we all have gifts, certain kind of gifts, but nobody acknowledges those, and so we're not supportive with those gifts. And so one of them is I could pick up people's energy,
Mhm.
even through a picture or you know like that. But I didn't know anything about that.
Mhm.
So I was in treatment, got to treatment that very first day or evening or that weekend. This lady walks by and very very beautiful native lady walks by. And I was asking, wow, who's that? And they said, oh, that's one of the counselors' wife. So, oh. And so 3 weeks went by and nothing happened. And back then they used that hot seat method. And so
I don't know what
that
you mean
third
by
week,
a hot seat method.
was they would put you on the spot.
Oh, and make you have to say your feelings.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
So I was addressed and he says, so well, Mr. Whittle, he said, um, what you thinking about? And then, at 24, 23 years old, I was slouched in my seat. And as soon as he asked that question, I, sat up in my seat and cleared my throat and looked at him and I said, honestly? And he says, well, yeah, that's why I asked. And so I add more fuel to the fire. And he said, so I said, you old lady. He says, get up. So at that time, I almost kicked myself out and stuff like that. But see, negatively, I was learned I could read people. But today I do it positively to try to help them because at that time, nobody um showed me that we as native people we have gifts and probably non-natives too that um we could feel other people's pain. We could feel their like not only their pain but like their being real distant.
Hmm.
And so um that I think that's the reason why today I really like helping children because nobody is helping them with that gift. And if somebody helped me back when I was young, I think I probably wouldn't have went down that path, but obviously I went down that path to learn something. And
Well,
so,
it gives you a deeper understanding when you're helping another person that's an alcoholic or a substance abuse. You've been through it. So it's different than when they're getting treatment from someone who just clinically reads about those things and wants to help. But somebody who's been through the experiences is coming from a different place of knowledge or wisdom that someone who's just studied it in books and wants to help people has a different approach because you're coming from the heart from having been there. I can't imagine what it was like to grow up on a reservation after hearing some of the things that went on. Like I had no idea about until I saw the Killers of the Flower Moon film. I was so shocked. I had never heard this story. of the history of Canada and US and what they were doing to children, to these indigenous people. So I think there's so much generational trauma that has to be healed, because I do believe that sometimes children are carrying trauma of their families, even though they maybe necessarily didn't have the trauma themselves. They can still be carrying the trauma from a generations before. And in speaking with a Buddhist monk that I meditate with on Sundays, he was saying how uh, oh, I just lost my train of thought. Sorry. uh, he was talking about how uh, he grew up in Vietnam, and he said once he went into he has spent his last 20 years going into prisons and working with prisoners. And he tells me that if you go to and interview each different prisoner, that you will find they ended up there because they grew up with some sort of traumas that were never addressed. And the traumas never being addressed and never being able to have someone to guide or help them, ended them up in these prisons. And they're not just there because they're bad people or because there was a reason that they ended up in these situations, just like a reason you ended up abusing alcohol. It didn't just come out of a fun thing, it came out from traumas that people have had. So I was wondering if there's a few instances of the work that you've done with horses and healing, and how it has affected and changed the lives of people with trauma. And do you find your work is mostly with Native Americans when you are doing healing work, or is this something that's just a diverse people that are attracted to you to come to you for healing, or do you specifically work with Native and Indigenous people?
I work with different non-natives. Some of them are locally. Um, the learning the horses and going and see in my one of my degrees is in pastoral studies, and my dad on his deathbed he promised me to follow in his ways, and I tried, um and it was very difficult. So I went to school, got a degree. I was heading to seminary, and you know, it was learning experience. So I know a lot about the Bible and how other denominations came to be, and all those things. And what happened was my uncles were having a sweat lodge. And they were all older gentlemen, and so I was visiting them, and nobody was to bring in the rocks for them, so I hauled rocks in for them. And somebody from the church saw me and reported me. And so I was called down to this and met with the um association that they had, and they're all um Lakota and Dakota ministers. And so I said, I got one question for each of you, and I said I'll make it easy for you. And they said, okay, what's your question? And I asked each and every one of them if they believed in the owl, and each one said yes. I said, okay, I have no further questions. I said, here's my resignation. And I left and never went back. Um, and as far as the horses, um, you know, I worked in a school called Takini School. I worked there in 2000 to 2010. And there I used the horses. And um there's a lot of horse people out there today. Um and there's a guy by the name of Ray Hunt. I think it was Ray Hunt. He wrote a book, um, or maybe it was one before him. But anyway, this guy wrote in there, he wrote a one sentence about Native Americans. He said, when the Spaniards came, the Native Americans were as one with the horse.
Mm-hmm.
And so all these natural horsemen, they learned those from Native Americans,
Mm-hmm.
but they never gave credit where credit is due.
Mm-hmm.
And so they all made the money for themselves and all that good stuff. And that's how the world is. And so today I'm not trying to um discredit anybody, but all I'm trying to do is to bring that back because that belongs to the native people. And what's really important and to our people is the oral history. And so hopefully down the road with this podcast, we would do more of grandma stories to get out there. That way, some of those can be looked at and saved. And so,
I this is
um,
this is this is an issue for me because I have wanted more sharing of the stories of indigenous people, and I've had a very hard time uh, finding people willing to share stories where things were kept more uh, I understand from all the trauma. I went up to Alaska and I spent time. I went with a Native American woman, my friend Edna, who's a Haida Indian, and we went up to Alaska for her to do healing work that uh, the United States government would pay her in a program to work with only other Haida people to help them to heal through trauma. And she did wonderful work with them and invited me to go up there. And she said, I've never brought a white person before, so I don't know how they're going to treat you when you come. And everywhere we went, because they live in a place called Heidelberg, and it's a small island in Alaska, then you can only get there. I mean, the United States government gave them a little island for their people. There's only 350 natives left. They were known as being the finest navigators, and they were also people that were wiped out with the smallpox and blankets situation, and their language was beaten out of them. I spent time with people who were now bringing the language back, teaching the children the language again that had been lost, and being with them in this little spot in Heidelberg, Alaska. Well, when we would get together as a group, no one would acknowledge me existing because I was the white person. But when I look at everybody physically, between all the interracial mixings, many of these people are native but looked as white as I am. So when we met, everyone would say, I'm from, just like you, it would be a description of which was your family tribe. So it would be, I came from the Crow clan, or they would say the different clans. And everyone would, even though I'd be there with, 6 people, wasn't like a big crowd, it would be like I was not there at all. So I couldn't take it anymore by the third day, I think. And so when they were talking around, introducing and saying hello, I said, "I'm from the Schmohawks." I said, it was a Jewish tribe, you know? And something about my humor broke the ice and they allowed me in. And then that became a deep healing experience because I shared stories with them that enabled them to open up their stories. And we had a beautiful heart to heart. And I've been in communication with some of these elder Haida women in Alaska since that time. And I felt I felt honored, and I was presented with three eagle feathers when I left for the work that I did assisting my friend in this workshop. And I thought how wonderful that there was a workshop being funded by the government, who was the one that was responsible for putting all the trauma on these people. So it was good to see that they were finally doing something to help and not helping with an American trained person, but helping with another Haida Indian healer trained person. So I thought that was a very positive thing to see going on up there. But I'm wondering, there were things that you talked and wrote about. There was something you wrote about, and I was reading on one of your sites that was about understanding one's self worth and value and how it can bring change to a family and bring them closer together. And I wanted to know, how do you do this? How do we understand one's self worth?
See,
Because self worth, it's a very important thing, and I deal with this issue, and I'm curious to know, how do you heal with this, or how do you understand what your self worth is?
see, when um, when we go through that trauma or um picking up the trauma of the past, like if my parent, if I didn't deal with, or my parents didn't deal with it, whatever was handed down, will go on me. Um, so as little children, like my grandma, we would go gather wood, or we'll pick plants, and we would come back, and she would turn and she would call me. And I would nod to her. I said, "Grandma, I'm right here." And so she says, "No, I'm calling your spirit to come home." And so as little children, it was very important to hang on to that navel. And today I see some of it trying to come back. Um, and so that navel, if you're a male, then um, it was a lizard, and for the girls, it was a little. We always honored the turtle, and so as Lakota people, we come from a matriarchal society,
Mhm.
and so does a horse. And so when you go through those traumas, you don't know what your self-worth is. You keep reading that same message that somebody said or did to you, and and until you deal with it and learn to let it go. See those horses, there was three, there was Just like today, a lot of fighting going on, government being shut down, tribes not getting along, families not getting along. So it's probably kind of like that during that time. And all the Wamakashka is all the animals.
Mhm.
They all got together and said that they were going to kill us all. But the buffalo and the horse and the plant nation said, no, what gives you guys that right? They said, we're going to help them.
Mhm.
And so that's how that self-worth come from that weight what they call it. Weight is a vow that this horse made, this buffalo made, and the plant nation made. Today they still hold their vow,
Mhm.
and but we forgot ours.
Mhm.
And so that's what I bring back um to the people is that, you know, and once I figured that out and trying to explain that was very difficult because in the Western world, like just like working here, there was a suicide attempt and they called me and I took care of it. And um that next day I was approached by um some mental health people and they said, are you certified or trained in that? And so I said, not in yours, but I said culturally,
Mhm.
I said, of course I am. And I said, and they came to me, not you.
For a reason.
Yeah. So see, then that self-worth started coming, okay. So before, if I didn't heal, I would still get pushed down that
Mhm.
I'm not good enough. I
Mhm.
would still allow them to push me aside and say, being native, being Lakota, having culture is not good enough. And today we do that amongst ourselves. We're so jealous of each other that we
Mhm.
don't even support each other. But the main thing is that every time I get done with a ceremony or a sweat lodge or whatever, I would say, Unshiriki cha oki cha umpo. What that means is love each other and help each other.
Mhm.
And so that self-worth, like was like that. If I allowed them to put me down and say those things to me, um, my self-worth will probably be this small. But I didn't allow them.
Mhm.
I continued to grow, and in the most recent, I lost my wife in 2022 to suicide.
Oh.
And that had me even grow even more to look inside. Because, like I said, and I even one of these days, if we do another podcast, I wrote a Lakota grief because that's it. People would come to the funeral, say, "Oh, I feel you," and that's it. And then they're gone.
Mhm.
Nobody comes. Nobody checks on you.
Mhm.
So what I teach people is that if we're gonna make it, we can't wait for somebody to come and save us.
Mhm.
We have to save ourselves. And that's where you have to get in there and start doing the healing process with yourself. asking for help. A lot of times we're so our egos get in the way that we think we can do it ourselves. And I see a lot of doctors do that too, or they're going and going, they're helping, they want to help people, but they're not taking care of themselves. So we have to take care of ourselves and love ourselves
Mhm.
before we can love somebody else. So
That's a
yeah.
very, very powerful and very important message and teaching. And and I believe that to be very, very true. Uh, and um, is there a I'm still getting over my emotional reaction to you having lost your wife so recently because that's only a few years ago. And have you been able to have you been able to process all that, and are you still in a grieving process, or from all the experience you've had you were able to was that I'm just saying that that has to be I've I lost my father-in-law to suicide, and it's a very shocking thing when it happens, no matter what. And I'm wondering then how you were able to heal with that.
Um, I think it'll never go away.
Mhm.
But because when they leave, they didn't take that pain with them. They left it with all of us, the family, the children. And during that time, um, going through it, trying, what we do as people, we forget that kids are grieving too.
Mhm.
But I mean, it's all about ourself and what we're doing, and especially now we have social media and people looking for validation on there. Um, you know, it's real easy to get on that, but
I I have to mention that today is the anniversary of my dad passing. And so when you pick this day, and he died, it was 17 years ago. And consequently, yesterday we had election day. And my dad had said, I just want to live long enough to see a black president be elected. And that year, I forget what election day was, but he died, it must have been the 4th, and he died the next day after election day. And even though he wasn't able to speak and was in the transition state, I laid next to his bed with him, was holding him, and said, you waited, and yes, a black president has been elected, Dad. And I'm not sure how much of it he heard or understood, but I got to experience. I learned so much in his passing, and there was so much for me in the grieving because he was the closest person for me and my family members. So it was the biggest loss for me to have. And I come from a Jewish family, and they don't like to do cremation. But my dad was a very spiritual man that was not into religion. He was into disposing of the body quickly and cleanly, and not leaving any taking up land to have some body buried into the ground. So he insisted on cremation, and I was the person in charge. I was his person to do that, and I actually was able to bless his body before putting it into the uh, mortuary oven, and got to put his body in. And also, there was a little hole in there. And my husband said, look, you can see. And we could look inside and see I saw my dad's entire body burning, with all of his bones and skeletal. And I could see all of this and the flames and the colors coming up. And it was an incredible sight to see that I will always hold forever in my vision. And his it was a true closure and letting go, and it was a true moment for me to be able to bring all the elements with me before he went in. We had the fire, water, air, earth, and I had put these things on his body. And I know the rest of my family thought I was crazy, but I know I was doing what was the right thing for his passing and for our relationship and grieving, and I was honoring his wishes. And I find that these are this is this people are losing people, and a lot of people don't know how to grieve. And when I was with the Haida Indians, uh, I happened to I'm a very intuitive person, and I happened to note that someone was going to die. And I told the woman someone was going to die right then. And she got a phone call a few minutes later that her mother in law didn't wake up and she died in her sleep that night. And when they grieved, it was tremendous crying. And I mean, stuff that you're not allowed to do in this American culture. And I so um, connected with their form of being able to bodily yell and let out all of their emotion and not to be embarrassed by any of it. And they howled and cried, and I thought it was an amazing thing. And I was invited to the funeral, and because some of the family had become Christians, they ended up having a dual funeral in one space that was half Haida Indian funeral and half Western uh, uh, Western funeral. And the difference of the connectiveness and the beauty of the Native American service compared to the Christian one that was so kind of empty and soulless to me, where the Native American one was really an honoring of the soul and the spirit of the person. It was a once in a lifetime. I happened to be there, get to have such an experience of being at a funeral of a Native American person passing. So I think that this must be something that you must have seen through your growing up as well, coming from the reservation. And, like you're saying, men aren't supposed to cry. And so this is now changing, and we are allowing now people to experience grief. Is that what's happening now? Did I lose you?
Yeah, no. Um, when when it was happening, um, or before it happened, that some of the things that I hope that people would uh understand is that the last 2 days we were home together, and she was very happy. Um, she cleaned out my pickups. She helped me get water and feed horses, and we just had 2 amazing days. And so I thought that she was getting better.
Hmm.
But what was happening was she was already thinking about leaving. And we had a sweat lodge ceremony a couple nights, maybe 3, 4 nights before that, and they were very active. The spirits were, and so I think it was just a, a act that day. Um, uh, I won't get into too much of that detail, but after it happened. Naturally, her family blamed me. Um, but at the same time, that's a part of that process. Um, and so today, I wouldn't let anybody disrespect me.
Mhm.
If they are, I would not, um, I would cut them from being a part of my life. Um, and that's, wasted energy and, and so, actually really doing my own healing, and asking for help. And so as Native people, we have this thing called wiping of the tears. And I did that for my children, but nobody didn't do it for me. And so I always thought, well, hey, I can take care of myself. But inside I was dying. I went to see what we have is we have extended family too, like if our own family is not healthy, then we would adopt other people to fulfill that. So my little brother's he's not my biological brother, but at his Sundance, he in his prayer he said, Creator, he said, pray for my older brother here. His wife went home, and that's he's killing himself inside, and I didn't realize that until um after or during that time, because right after my Sundance or his Sundance, I had mine, and I told him, I said I want to have that ceremony done, so he did, and after that, what we do is what I did was I put a offering on the south side of that tree, and the offering was to feed my wife and all our family on the other side, and because over there, to me, the way I believe is there's no hell. Um, and so anyway, I fed them, and they said, "Taco and wash that try talking." So I put that in the ground at my tree at our Sundance and on the south side. Something will could grow from there. And and since I did that, I really started to begin to heal because otherwise, you know, we don't heal. And even to as far as helping other people, being in this um leadership role, what I found out is even for myself, sometimes we don't want to heal because the pain's the last connection to what
Mhm.
we have lost.
Yes.
That's very deep because that's true. I didn't want to heal because I was still hanging on to her and hoping that one day, even though I saw her body. I wrapped her in one of my buffalo robes and buried her that way, regardless of what was being said, I honored her like that, and um and today, we clean her grave, but we know that she's not there. They can be
Right.
at multiple places at one time. Um,
Yes.
so their energy, um, and they don't have no pain. And so those are the teachings that was given a long time ago. But again, nobody came to help me while being here. And so just at Sundance, I asked for help. And so that's very important to check on people that are grieving.
Yes.
Um, and even though like for yourself, even though it was that long ago, it's still like it was yesterday.
Hmm. When I think, and the only way I realize that is when I look at linear time and I say, it's been 17 years. It seems like it was just yesterday. And it's 17 years he's gone. And he was a powerful guy. And he affected my life in so many deep, amazing ways. So, speaking about family, there was a story I wanted you to share that we talked about in the beginning of the show that you said your grandmother, there was a story of the sacred ghost dance that was told to you in the oral tradition. And I was wondering if that was a story you'd be able to share with us now, because we're speaking about death.
Um, oh, I'll share a little, bits and pieces of it,
Okay.
um, because it's what I would like to do is when I do, I like to just make it that, um,
Oh, well, we could do a separate
because
podcast.
because what I would like to do is I don't know how to do that yet,
Hmm.
because I'm uh, I'm a right brain thinker and I'm not too good with technology. But what I would like to do is I would play a little bit of her telling it, and then I would explain it a little bit as like that. That's how I would like to present it.
So we could
Um,
do that at another time if you're interested. We could do
well,
a
yeah,
separate.
well,
Yeah.
I'll just share a little bit about
Okay.
it. Uh, in the language, she names who these individuals were. There was four of them, and they all came from the place where I come from, a little place called Red Scapel. And just like he was talking about um with the smallpox, there's a place right where my place is around the corner. There was a um they called a winter camp,
Mhm.
and that's where they brought all the blankets. And so a lot of our people were buried there, or they're still laying there, and and nothing has been done about it to put anything up about it yet. I before Trump wasn't got in office, I was a um called a tribal monitor. So I went around looking for our ancestors out there, making sure they weren't being built over them. Anyway, so I know how to find our ancestors. And so I flagged them all. And there was a little indention there that and they threw most of them in there. Um, and there's a medicine woman that was buried north of there, and she had an amphibian altar. And so when she was ready to die, she wanted a cup of water from the creek that ran by there. And so all the spider, the worm, the fish. The fish was dead, but the other ones were alive that came out of her, and she had them put them back in the um in the water in the creek, and then she passed. So those are all still there. Um, so anyway, she talks about those four individuals, and just like today, if we're going somewhere, it'll take us a long time to get there. But coming back, they came back fast.
Mm.
So, and on their trip there, each day they encountered something. And when they got to where they said Wanakya, they went to the people where the ghosts lived, and when they got there, um, you know, they took them to the middle, and there was a huge teepee, and they got there, and there was a cloud that was coming down, and this guy was walking off of there, and that was God, I guess. And he was wearing a hat and a plume, and he wasn't the guy that has a beard and long hair that you see in the church. He wasn't like that.
Mhm.
Um, and he spoke the language, and he shook that one's hand, and he was the leader, and he acknowledged him as the leader, and he said, "There's two reasons why you came. One is to come see me because of what I was going on," and he said, "and you want to take something back."
Mhm.
And so, uh, one of those guys died on the way, and he was already over there. And so, you know, today we'll have a call in a priest, a medicine man, whatever, pray for our people so they can go, you know. Um, According to that story, that's not true. He was already over there.
Mhm.
Anyway, he didn't shake this one guy's hand, he says, and he explained. He says, "I didn't shake his hand because he thinks too much." So when they came back with that, they said no more than twice a week. So when they came back with that, they came back with the songs and how to dance, and it spread like wildfire. And they were doing it more than twice a week. That's the reason why our people ran with it towards Pine Ridge to try to get help. But they killed over 300 of our people at Wounded Knee
Mhm.
because they didn't listen. It was supposed to be no more than twice a week.
Mhm.
So there's a consequence for not listening to God when we're asking for something. And another thing is this grandpa taught me was if you're in ceremony and the spirits come in and they say something, they will say, "No, kach future." Means it's hard to understand what they say because each one of us will take it differently. Depends on where our mindset is.
Mhm.
And so I'll share, just that much about the ghost dance. And um, the way my grandma tells when she gets into the story, she'll say, "Takoja le wakan waglakinte." She'll say, um, "Grandson, I'm gonna talk in a sacred manner today." You know, that's when it's kind of like a movie. You hear the wood popping in the stove, and it's nice and warm, and you'll sit down to, you know, eat some wasna or some corn wasna, and listen, and and because when you're talking in a language, that's what it's like. It's like you're watching a movie.
Mhm.
So um, it was that way, and it was very. I mean, we probably didn't have much, but it's the value of being rich. Is different. Today you can have cows and buffalo and horses or whatever, and be rich that way. But but to be rich in that culture and that love, that's something that is felt versus, having that money.
Mhm.
And so and growing up poor, I didn't know I was poor, so I went to school. So um but yeah, that ghost dance was it's different.
Mhm.
Even how the horse came. Is they would tell, she would tell about the horse was here, but it had paws. So if you look at a horse today, alongside their knee there's a little thing called a chestnut. That is evident that they had paws. And so I
Wow.
would tell my children that. And I don't like to read because I did when I was in freshman freshman in 10th grade. Um, but today, if I read, I'll get sleepy. Anyway, uh, we moved here to Santee, and there's a place called Ash Falls. There's a lot of dinosaurs there. And my girls got there, and they took off running. And my little guy, he was young then, and my wife was walking in between us. And pretty soon the girls come running back, said, "Dad, Dad, um, we found that horse you're talking about." And that horse that had paws. I said, "Yeah." And I said, when they were coming back, they were going to be bigger, faster, and stronger. So even as the history says that the Spaniards brought the horses, the horses were always here. And so today they call them Lakota horses or Sitting Bull's horses. So we always had horses,
So
but
you're saying there were horses here with all the indigenous people way before the Spaniards brought horses here. But in history, they write that the Spaniards brought the horses. Is that what they say? Well, you can't believe anything in the written history anywhere because I think of things that we're living through history because now I've lived through the 50s, the 60s, and when you read the history, when they write about political or things that happened and you actually live through it and you read it and you say, I was there. That wasn't really what happened. But and I don't even want to go into what Trump is doing to destroy the history of and remove history from the way it truly was. But what I would like to do, because we're way more than an hour into our show, but I had two other things I just wanted to go over before we wind up here, and I was wondering. I want to talk at the end about the retreats, but I was wondering. Uh, there were one, two, three, four. Um, let's see. I was just wondering if you can give just a little bit of a description of what actually happens or what goes on when you conduct a retreat with horses for healing. I was in a place in Kansas called Council Grove, and I believe it's a place where Native Americans used to come, all different tribes, for council. And I went there for a retreat, and it was the first time I met therapy horses. And it was a couple that takes their horses and does therapy with people. And until you, I had never heard of any of this. And this was back some years ago, about 10 years ago or more. And I saw their horses, and nobody was around, and everyone was in the conference. And so I went over to the horses because I had been in Mongolia, and I felt like I was supposed to do something with these horses. So I played the jaw harp, which I'm sure you're familiar with, one of these little guys like this. Did I lose you again? Are you there? It's a little jaw
No,
harp.
I mean,
Okay, so I played this jaw harp for these therapy horses, and I just felt like I was supposed to give them this. And then I walked away, and some hour or two later, these people came up to me because I was playing my jaw harp again, and they said, "Were you over by our horses playing that sound?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "Because it's Mongolian, and Mongolia is all about horses." And so I thought they would enjoy hearing the sound. And she said, "Well, I just want to thank you because we traveled for days in the trailers with these horses to bring them here, and none of them ever went to sleep. And they really needed rest. And after you played the jaw harp, they all went to sleep. So thank you for putting the horses to rest." So I felt so good that I felt this draw toward these horses, and I have a great respect for horse. I'm not gonna go jumping up on a horse or anything, but I felt that we could just connect through this sound, and we did. And had they not given me the feedback, I wouldn't have known that I had actually done that. So I was appreciative to receive the feedback. So I was wondering if you could give a little bit of, in case, we can tell people at the end how they can contact you by phone or email. But if they're interested in attending one of these future retreats that you're going to be doing in different places around, I know you were up in Washington, I think, and sometimes you've been in California, and you've been in places in the West. Um, what exactly is what how would you describe your retreat, or how would you describe someone? I understand that this is very good for people who are trying to get rid of addiction, or people who are having different difficult problems in their life. What would you say would be the description of what happens, and is there a story you could share of a healing maybe that occurred during one of these retreats for one of the attendees that came to your horse retreat?
sure, I'll share a couple of stories. One I did hear locally. See, what happens is I call them relatives instead of clients.
Mm-hmm.
When they go off, you know, go to prison, jail, whatever, and they come back and they sober up and start living their life, and it's really hard for that family to accept them, that they've changed, and so even with their children. So if they go through Western therapy, it'll take them, some years just um, to get trusted again. In the meantime, they're getting frustrated, they're getting triggered. Then a lot of them will say, "Well, might as well just go back out there because they don't nobody believes in me anyway." And so what I do is I'll blindfold uh, the the mom and the child. So the first time I did that, I had kids all over the place, and it only took like 5, 10 minutes. And you know, I'll ask them who wants to go first, and long time ago when we sat down to do a ceremony or anything, we put a blanket down and a family sits on it. And like I said, that first day I had kids all over the place. After that session where they took turns wearing that bandana over their eyes and that moving that horse around, because when you're moving that horse around in a pin with your eye you can't see, you have to trust. And so that afternoon, after each one went through that, you had children leaning on mom like how it's supposed to be.
Mm.
And the horse brought that connection. And so, and the other day, I had somebody come and and they were crying because of what somebody said or did to them. And that mare I have, she come right over, passed up all the other horses, and went right up to that girl and gave her a hug.
Mm.
So those horses, they know 4 days in advance of who they're gonna work with and what they're working with.
Mhm.
And so this and what happens is there's four life changes that we go through. First is being born, being a baby. Then we'll go into adolescent. And then when we're adolescent, our voices change, our bodies changing,
You're right.
um, and then going into adulthood. That one we stay in that stage for the longest, then we'll go into the elder state. So within those four, most of the tragedies happen to us or adversities happen to us when we're adolescent because a lot of people don't understand what adolescents are going through. And so rather than being patient, we would whip them, holler at them, whatever. And so once they're there, so that's why we there's a lot of adult children because we're reacting rather than responding. So a lot of them get stuck there. So when they get stuck there, what I do is I'll take them back there, um, and I'll bring them back through a guided imagery. I think that's what they call it. And I'll call their spirit back, call their name back. And then always breathing because when we're in that trauma or if we're triggered, we hold our breath. And just like the trees take in the toxic, and when they breathe out, they're breathing good air. We breathe in good air and release toxic. So that Mother Earth is the backwards. And so when you're working a horse or being there, you're not working that horse, you're working you. And a lot of times, like, yesterday I had two individuals come, or three, and that mare wouldn't come in. She was running all over the place. And so I said, after we got her, and I said, somebody didn't want to be here. And they looked at each other, their jaw dropped, and they said, that one raised her hand and said, that was me. She didn't want to be there. She didn't want to take a look at herself. But that's just it. We don't want to take a look at ourselves, but those horses help us to connect to ourselves. Um, so what I'll do is I'll move that horse both directions in the round pen, and then I'm looking for four cues that he gives. See, we have two brains just like the horse, and there's a lot of stories I have that go with that. Uh, A horse can have one eye on you and the other eye looking out. There's a name for that. But we can't do that. The horse can. And they'll look for that one eye on you. They move their lips. Um, And when you switch directions, that circle will get smaller. And that last one is they'll run with their head to the ground. That's saying, okay, I trust you. Then I'll stop, drop everything, I'll turn away, and then they'll come up to me. And then when I walk off, they'll follow me. It's like a dog would with no rope around them.
Hmm.
And that's connecting with them. That's when our people would get on them and to ride them because you're asking that horse, you're not telling them. So if
Right.
something happens out there, that horse will wait for you. But if you force them and something happens out there, they'll leave you. So I'll share this little part and then we'll start wrapping up.
Yes.
There's a Sundance song that they sing that goes with this. And that goes, We are kaya eto kamo taho shunka wa kan eche la wachi ye we are hey ho we hey. That song says is, what am I gonna do with this woman when this horse is the only one I could depend on? And I had one of my horses die. He was more than a friend. Um, and when he died, it was really difficult because that horse, he never talked bad about me. He never, you know, stabbed me in the back. He always had my back.
Hmm.
Um, you know, so that song says a lot. And so, um, yeah, that's what's to be
That's
expected in that. It's
I'm glad
awesome.
I'm glad you explained some of it because I didn't understand if you got on the horse and went riding for I didn't understand what the person was doing with the horse. I didn't understand how the retreat works. And now I understand. You're learning how to connect your spirit to the spirit of the animal of the horse, and then that's freeing you and connecting you back to yourself. I was thinking that they were getting on the horse, and I was trying to figure out were they riding or what that was. So they're not, so that's a very beautiful thing. And I would like, before we go to your last words of wisdom here, could I then share, I'm going to share then now, would that be your email, or what would you like to share for contact? If any, maybe you could just say it yourself. For contact, if anyone is interested in going and having this experience, or possibly healing some trauma or addiction or any other situations that need healing, how would they find out about when your next retreat is, or where they'll be, or how they can get involved in that?
Okay, I think our next or my next session will be back in Klamath Falls. We're working on a date right now. Um, and then I'm not sure where we're going after that. But like I said, my website is being worked on right now. But you could put up either email that I have or my phone number. Um,
So would that be the 402 number?
yes,
So 402-851-9856 would be
yes,
the number they could call if they're interested in
yeah.
finding out where there'll be the retreat. And then would it be the Be Widow email, or the other email?
Uh, I think that one's easiest. That the
Yeah, yeah,
widow
because of the line.
60.
Yeah, so it would,
Yeah.
so if you'd like to contact Douglas about what retreats he has coming up or sessions, you can contact him at lowercase DWIDOW, the number six, the number zero, at gmail.com. So you have two ways of contacting Douglas to find out when he's having more retreats coming up and where they're going to be, because there might be one near where you're living. You have no idea, since he has them in different parts of the country. And do people ever come to you for these horse healing, or do they ever come to Nebraska? Or
Yeah, I had that. That's how I got to go towards the West Coast.
mm-hmm.
During COVID, I was doing some Zoom meetings with University of Iowa, and some of those guys attended that, and that's how I ended up out there. Um, and so, and some of them came here. There was a lady that came from Montana too, and so I took them on individually, um, also, and some want to teach it, and there's other people that try to say that you can get trained in this to do this. Um, it's really, I mean, yeah, you can probably do those things, but the main thing, if you're going to be effective working with other people, you have to heal yourself
Mm-hmm.
because you can't take somebody down the road and without healing yourself. So if you still got trauma and you still got whatever, you know, you can't help them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, but if you're healing yourself, then yeah,
Yes.
you can teach others or you know, so that this guy that's getting me to go back over there, he came here. I went over there this past summer. Um, and he's starting to do it himself. But the main thing is, that's like I said, that confidence. Don't let other people put you down because we do that to ourselves.
Very good advice and very good teaching in that. So this is my last question for you, and then we're ending our show tonight today, which is, what are the words of wisdom in closing that you would like to share with our listeners? Any words of wisdom that you'd like to end this show with? Whatever you would like to share.
Um, I think like for example, what I shared with sometimes we don't want to heal because of the pain is the last connection to what we have lost. Um, that runs deep because um
It does.
we could go into a sweat lodge, we can go to a horse thing, we can go to church, go to therapy, and put it out there. But as soon as we're walking out, or as soon as we're coming out, crawling out of that lodge, we'll pick it right back up because that's all we know.
Mhm.
But if we leave it and start replay, because we could heal ourselves from anything, any disease, any trauma. It all begins with touching your thought process. If you're thinking good things about yourself, if, um, getting centered, going to a tree, hugging a tree, being Mother Nature, holding a rock, whatever, those will recenter you versus, um, reading those old messages that people said to us and did to us. Chances are, whoever said and did those things are probably not even alive today, but
Mhm.
we're still carrying it as it's important.
Mhm.
So going back and tearing up those contracts and healing, um, it's awesome to be able to uh, heal yourself.
Yes. Beautiful. Well, I want to thank you so much for being here today. I've really enjoyed our time together. And I would love to have you come back again for another podcast if you're available in the future. And I would love to
Sure.
go more deeply into some of the sharing of oral stories that are the real truth, not the stories that were written down in history that aren't the real truth. And I also want to say that I do have a Jeff Heilman, who's the one who introduced me to you, coming on our podcast after your show. So I'm looking forward to our listeners hearing from someone who's actually attended your retreat and have him share what healing experiences he had. So this is really sort of like almost a part one of future podcasts that we have to do together. So I want to thank you so much for being with us here today. And I want to thank my daughter and my son for producing and posting my podcast. And I want to thank my husband for writing my description. And I want to thank all of you listeners for being here with us. We have over 110 different podcasts we've shown from different people from all walks of life. And today we had the wonderful, wonderful day with our guest, a wonderful Lakota man who works with healing with horses. So thank you so much for being here. And everyone, remember to share your stories because stories can heal.